Recap in minutes. Today we will be going through a thriller, drama, and action movie from 2012 called The Contractor. There will be spoilers ahead in this video, so chill out and enjoy. The movie begins showing a man named James Harper, a special forces sergeant who is scrubbing his gun before going to bed. He lives with his wife Brianne, and 8-year-old son Jack. He spends most of the time with them, and uses the rest of it to exercise and recuperate from the various injuries in his body, the nastiest one of which is in his knee that was fractured in Afghanistan. He goes to the base in the morning on his bike and shows up for his revaluation, that will allow him to rejoin the special forces and ace it on the surface. But the evaluating officers, including Lieutenant Colonel Roberts, find high doses of steroids like stanozolol, nandrolone, and human growth hormone in his blood, and they not only reject his candidacy, but also honorably discharge him, thereby cutting him off his pension and healthcare privileges. This shocks him and he remains silent for the next few moments. Then he requests the colonel to let him stay on the team. The colonel then replies that he would not accept him in his unit and orders him to leave the room. His team captain follows him outside the room and tries to calm him down. James thanks him and goes outside. He feels really sad about leaving his military family. When he comes back home, he tells his wife that he lost his job and the army is not going to give him any pension or retirement. Their son was listening to their talks while standing worried. His wife gives him the bills from the debt collectors and asks him how they'll manage now. They do not have enough money to pay the bills and mortgage. James says he knows a job with some real money, private contracting work. He considers going for that, but Brianne reminds him of his stand on it. She again forbids him from doing that kind of job and tries to calm him down. Later that night, when Brianne comes back home from her job, she sees James working on the roof. She asks him to come down, but he insists on fixing the roof. Then she shares some bad news about the death of James's best friend from the army. Mason had taken his own life. He also lost his job in the military just like him. She says she is going to the funeral, as she is scared. She also suspects James's state of mind, that he works in the middle of the night. James held her close and promised he'd never leave his family. In the next scene, James attends the funeral, and that's where he meets his long-term friend, and old boss from the military, Mike. Mike had left the military too, and he invites him over for dinner, under the pretext of showing his new home and reuniting James with his family. They hadn't seen each other in a while since Mike moved away. At night, they shared stories and chatted about their lives at the dinner table. Following that, they settled down to watch TV, and they ask each other what they are doing in life now. Mike plants the idea of doing a private black ops job. And during their conversation, Mike mentions the name of the company he is working at. He confirms that they pay a lot. Mike is aware of James's financial situation, and he knows that after seeing how well he is doing. So he asks Mike if he can help him get a job in his agency. He explains his situation, that he is broke and he needs work with some solid cash. Mike agrees to send his name up, and they keep watching the TV. The next day, Mike takes him to meet his boss at his workplace. He parks in a hilly area and goes to a man named Rusty Jennings. He is their boss and head of operations. He has read his story and files before meeting them. Now Rusty warns him that the job could be dangerous. During their conversation, it is revealed that Rusty was in the military too, just like him. But he decided to start his own company. He also mentions that all their missions get the green light and support from the government. They operate with direct presidential authority under Title 50, so he does not have to worry about getting in trouble. The meeting goes well and James is allowed to take part in his first mission for the mercenary. Rusty starts explaining his first assignment to him, that there is a threat in Berlin that threatens their national security. He asks him to go to Berlin for a couple of weeks. Mike and Dalton will do his paperwork. And he also gives him a check for $50,000 to support his family back home. James goes back to his home and wakes his wife. He gives that check to her, telling her that he has got this job as a babysitting corporate. She says she knows he is lying. No babysitting company pays so much. He assures her that it is not dangerous work, as he needs to take care of his family. And he leaves for Berlin in the morning. After that, he checks into a hotel room booked by Rusty. A few hours later, another agent, Katya, comes to his room. She tells James that Rusty gave her a drive for his mission. Then she shows a man on the screen saying that he is Salim Mohsen, a professor emeritus of virology, and he is a bioterrorist. James' mission is to spy on this scientist. That night, James takes up everything and heads out for his first mission. He watches and records everything outside of the scientist's house. He also captures photos of the lab where he works and even records his conversations. While he was spying on him outside of his house, he received a message from the agency that he must leave the post and reach a location. At their hideout, Mike wakes him up and gives the briefing to him along with Katya and another colleague, Bobby. Mike tells them that Salim Mohsen is making some kind of disastrous biological weapon, and he is planning to sell it to some terrorist groups with known links to Al-Qaeda and Syria. He tells the team they have been given permission to raid Salim's laboratory, retrieve all of his research data and then dispose of Salim. Later that night, they got all their gear and weapons ready before heading out to their mission. While arriving at the spot, they capture a guard and use him for biometric unlocks. They search for the scientist in the rooms, and after checking they found him. They put a cover on his head, take him to another room, and start interrogating him. James asks him who has access to the lab and where he keeps his backup data. He threatens him to cooperate as they have another team outside of his house. He says they have no limit to what they are authorized to do. They check his computers and get the data they need. Mike orders James to finish Salim, who protests that he is just a scientist working on a cure. James asks him to say the prayer before dying. He pleads with James not to harm him. He says he is just a scientist trying to save millions of lives with his research. He also tells James about a safety deposit box in a bank where he keeps a copy of his work. Meanwhile, James injects him with a lethal chemical and makes it look like an accident by setting the lab on fire. When they are leaving the lab, the team is confronted by the police, and after a prolonged shootout, during which the remaining team members are killed, James rescues a wounded Mike, who was shot in his leg, and they hide in a nearby storm drain in a forest. After diving underwater for a bit, they found a safe spot to rest. James tended to Mike's leg wound, which was serious. He had to do a blood transfusion because Mike had lost a lot of blood and was in bad shape. He believes he is about to die, and begs him to look after his family and get the data to Rusty. James provides a blood transfusion and saves Mike's life. After recuperating, Mike is ready to return to Rusty and the main team, but James's knee has given out on him, and he needs to rest up. He asks Mike to leave him there, as he cannot walk and he'll catch up later. Mike informs James he will be picked up from a specific location called Salvina Hotel and proceeds alone. 48 hours later, once James's knee felt better, he headed to the city to reach that hotel. There he goes inside the room. He finds a passport with some clothes Mike had left for him and a note saying Mike would be there in 6 hours. But after waiting a long while, Mike did not come. James got a bad feeling about it and decided to leave the hotel. He calls Rusty on a burner phone and asks about Mike. Rusty asks for his location and says he is sending a rescue team for him. He also shares the bad news that someone had leaked the secrecy of the mission, and Mike has not come back to the US. The German cops are after them, so he also feared Mike might have been in trouble. When he shares his location on Elson Bridge and waits for his men to rescue him, James saw the people Rusty had sent there. But James senses something is amiss. He asks him if his agent did not come to Berlin, how he managed to arrange his escape. He understands Rusty's plan and decides not to go with them. He asks him if he killed Mike too. Rusty grunts and cuts the call. After that, he goes in a different direction, throws the phone in a bin, and watches the movements of the suspected killers. Soon a hit team emerges and they shoot at James, and he runs for his life to get away from them. After some chase, James evades capture and manages to kill the hit team, who are revealed to be former recon Marines working for Rusty, and says he had sent them to take him out when they were supposed to pick him up. Before dying, one of the Marines gives James intel on a safe house but advises him not to return home. He asks James to send a quick message to stop the others coming after him. He tells the kill code and gives him his phone. Then from his phone, James sends the message that makes them believe that James is killed. He throws his phone on a train and goes to Salim's house. He grabs his wife, Sylvie, and threatens to give him his husband's computer files. He says his husband secured his work somewhere safe, he needs to know where. She tells him the address of a Swiss bank and he takes her and her son along with him. They reach a bank and she comes back with an iPad with the data. She hands it over to James and drops him somewhere on the road. After that, James calls one of his old teammates, Virgil. He is tranquilized and awakens in the safe house. Virgil explains that his knee was infected and that while it has been treated, he still cannot return to his family. A while later, he plays a video on the iPad in which Salim explains that he was indeed working on a successful H5N1 vaccine formula that he intends to provide for free, rather than sell to a pharmaceutical company. He was surprised to find out that Salim Mohsen was just an ordinary scientist. While Virgil shares dinner with James, another of Rusty's fire teams attacks. Virgil is killed, but James escapes, setting off a booby trap for Rusty's team. In the morning, James decided to head back to the USA using the passport Mike had given him. When he returns to the United States, he goes to see Mike's wife to break the news about her husband's supposed death. But he is shocked to see him alive at his home. James suspected that Mike had teamed up with Rusty to get him killed in Berlin. The next morning, James secretly followed Mike to figure out what he was up to. Suddenly, Mike ambushes him and asks him who he is. When he realizes it was James, Mike also gets shocked because Rusty told him that James had died in Berlin. That's why he did not come to the hotel to pick him up. Soon they realize that they have been played by Rusty for his own gains. James also tells him that Salim was a good scientist and they were fed bad. Now Mike asks him to stay away from home because if Rusty found out he was alive and back in his family, they would be in danger. They set up a plan to get revenge on Rusty. Mike agrees and gets him into Rusty's compound, where they surprise Rusty's guards. While Mike distracts everyone with a frontal attack and James infiltrates Rusty's house. When all of Rusty's men are killed, Mike and Rusty face off and shoot each other until he shoots him in the head. After that, James rushes to take Mike to the hospital, but he dies on their way. James burns Mike and his car to erase any traces. The movie ends when he returns home to his family and calls Jack from his truck. Thanks for watching. Subscribe Recap in Minutes for more videos like this, and help the channel grow.